Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session of Power in the Words. Today, in fact, is our last one, and we have the pleasure of Saadia Khilji joining us today. Saadia, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much, Aleena, for having me here. I look forward to our conversation.
Same here, we've got a lot to learn from you, and we're going to jump right into it. So, you've led some major digital transformations across global organizations that you worked in, right? Um, as we look forward, what do you see as the CIO's most important role in 2025 and beyond?
Because it's a very interesting time to be a CIO. There is so much going on in the industry and so much happening very, very quickly. Where I see the CIO's most strategic priority has to be focusing on the value rather than just saying, let's do Gen AI. And this is where CIOs really need to focus on what true value is a certain Gen AI capability going to deliver to the business, and how do we work around that. In addition to that, CIOs in today's stage will be successful if they are ready for reinvention, not just of themselves, but of their talent and their teams. And somebody who is really thinking about whatever we're doing right now, is that going to be valuable in the next few years?
That's great advice. So you've generated $100 million in business value through modernization and AI initiatives, right? Which strategic decisions did you make that you think had the biggest impact?
I've led a lot of transformations throughout my career, modernization of technology, digital transformation, implementing Gen AI initiatives across big companies. The one that I take a lot of pride in is reimagining the claims workflow. In one of my previous employers, we modernized the claims workflow so that we could accelerate decision making at different steps in the process. We leveraged machine learning models, and with that, we were able to gain around more than 40 million in improvements per year. Why this is a great strategic decision, which I felt had a great impact because it was not just an impact from a business outcome perspective, but this was all done by a team that was built from scratch. So brand new team came in, looked into the business problem, and we were able to deliver this value within a year's time frame. So I felt that it had an impact not from an outcome perspective, but also from grooming the talent and making them do something that was really valuable.
And building on that, how do you identify which technologies are worth investing in, which are just hype that is just going to pass over in a few months or even a few years?
My approach is always piloting, always it's exploring. I really believe in piloting new technology with the right measurable criteria. Do pilots, see if it's delivering the outcome that you expect it to deliver, and what are the learnings from that pilot. This approach really helps you not only see the value, it also helps you understand, is your organization ready, and makes you plan accordingly when you're doing the full implementation. Technologies are always going to come in, but there have been many times there are emerging technologies we have piloted, and that's not the fit at that point in time, and you don't make a decision to roll it out completely. So always starting with exploring it, piloting it for a shorter period of time, and quickly making a decision based on the outcome that that pilot is delivering. You measure it. You measure it for experience on the Gen AI. Whenever I've done pilots for Gen AI, it's been more focused on what is the experience it's creating, but more importantly, what's the accuracy? Is it really promising? Is it really delivering what it's promising? I think that's the key to measure at the end of a pilot.
I think that's a great strategy, but I'm going to follow it up by asking you, um, how do you make these decisions when you don't have that bandwidth to be piloting things? So, I mean, yes, you could have a shorter time duration for that pilot, but what if you have to make like a quick decision? Are there any other ways that you could go about it? Because not everybody will have that space and that bandwidth to be able to pilot it and to have that testing ground, so to speak.
You kind of plan it accordingly. Many times you don't have a bandwidth to do like a full-fledged pilot. You do a POC. You test it out on a much more smaller scale. So it really depends on the need. the risk that you want to take with it, and at the same time, how quickly do you want the outcome, and you make a decision accordingly. When I use the term pilot, what I really meant was test it out very, very quickly before you make a decision. Now, that could be in terms of a pilot, that could be in terms of a proof of tech, but you want to see how that really flows. Measure your capacity and make a decision accordingly.
Sounds great. Um, we talked about AI, and whenever we talk about AI, we obviously have to talk about how we can implement it in a responsible and secure way, right? So, as enterprises accelerate the AI adoption, what guardrails do you believe are essential to ensure that we're implementing it responsibly and in a secure manner?
From an AI perspective, at the end of the day, what do companies really want? They want value, but they want to make sure there's responsible and ethical use of AI. So the guardrails have to be very clear accordingly. To me, the way I think about it is either they're operational guardrails or they're implementation guardrails. When you think about the operational guardrails for AI, you want to make sure that you're answering some key questions before you build the guardrails, which are around, does this go against our standards? From a compliance perspective, I come from a financial services industry. To us, compliance is extremely important. You cannot roll out technology that is not compliant. So that is the first question to ask, and you build guardrails around it in partnership with your compliance team. Security is another one. Does it put any harmful or inappropriate outputs out there? And what is going to be the impact of that? When you think about an implementation guardrails, you deliver on Gen AI initiatives, but you really have to make sure you have human in the loop because you want to mitigate the risk. I've implemented Gen AI technologies in which it's been critical that the output is being validated by a human because we are not at a point that you can make some very, very critical decisions without human validating it, especially coming from the background and the industry that I'm part of, which is financial services. So think about human in the loop, guardrails to help you mitigate the risk, and on the operational side, compliance and security and the impact of that.
That's a great point you've made, right? Keeping humans in the loop. Uh, and that takes me to my next question. What's your approach to building technology that improves user experience across complex businesses, right? You talked a little bit about focusing on outcomes, and then we talked about keeping humans in the loop. So, I mean, we know that humans are really at the center of it. And like you said, AI is not at a level where we could just depend on it or rely on it completely. But what other approaches do you take when you're building technology, keeping in mind your end user?
So, a few years ago, I was introduced to the methodology of design thinking.
Yeah.
And that was really eye-opening for me. I'm glad I was able to leverage design thinking. I've been a proponent of design thinking in every role that I've taken, and it really helps. It's an iterative, for those who don't know, design thinking is an iterative methodology that helps us understand users, redefine the problems. And before you build innovative solutions or develop solutions, it helps you take a step back and say, what problems are we trying to solve? The stages of design thinking that I always vouch for are empathizing, experimenting, collaborating, so that the experiences that you create in the end are meeting the user needs, and then you design systems around it. In my experience, whenever we have taken a step back in the beginning of a solutioning exercise for major complex initiatives or things that we're trying to do across an organization, and you start with this approach, you end up designing systems and building systems that are really keeping the user experience at the forefront. And you kind of use the thought process throughout implementation of new technology. This really helps you with your change management approach as well. So I really believe that starting that way, which is more like you don't want to jump into this is the solution, you want to take a step back and think from an experience that really helps you define the right solution and make sure you're measuring that experience effectively when you implement it.
I couldn't agree with that more. As somebody who works in product, I was drawing parallels with product thinking while you were talking about design thinking, right? Because it also keeps user at the center while reimagining the solution, as well as understanding and redefining the problem so we can define a solution that fits that problem. We've talked quite a little bit about technology. Let's talk a little bit about human resource, right? Because you have a lot of experience under your belt. You worked with the latest technologies, and you've also had the experience of leading and working within teams. What do you look for when you're hiring tech leaders?
There's an advice that I always keep with me when I became an executive and I started hiring for leaders and I started hiring for teams and started growing my teams. One of my leaders at that time, he gave me really good advice, which stuck with me. When you hire for competency. Do not focus on skills as much as you focus on the competencies. And I've kept that with me forever. People can learn skills. Technology is changing, right? It's what you're learning right now. It will be very different from what you're going to learn next year. So skills are important, but whenever I'm making a decision, it's more about the competency of the individual and the leader that I'm hiring. Do they have the integrity? Do they have the learning mindset, which is a growth mindset, which means that when they make mistakes, they'll learn from it and they'll grow. How will they deal with conflicts? And what is basically their emotional intelligence? I think that's really important. To me, there's definitely one of the things I look for leaders who can grow with their teams and who are not arrogant, who are not just thinking, I know everything, because nobody knows everything. We all learn together, and you need to be a leader who can learn from your teams and who can learn from experts around you. And that's only going to happen if you have that mindset in which this is how I learn and this is how we grow, and not be that person who says, I know everything.
That's pretty nice. And that probably will give hope to a lot of people who feel overwhelmed these days because there's a lot of technology that's coming up, right? So you're always thinking that you're a little bit behind and you can't really be up to speed on everything. But as long as there's potential to learn, I think that people will find the way. And so, apart from scaling teams, you actively mentor and lead community initiatives also, right? So, there's a lot of human interaction there, and you're mentoring people. What gaps do you see in the current tech leadership, especially in the context of women, that you feel like need to be addressed so that growth can be exponential?
There is one common factor. And, I hire leaders all the time. I've been doing that for years, at least, I would say 8 years or more. Um, One common factor that I always see in women and underrepresented groups, especially in the leadership, it's the confidence. There's so many times I've interviewed people and I can exactly tell that they have the same skills and what they bring to the table. And women are usually underselling themselves because they are always looking at what they don't have. And it just appears in the confidence in which they interview as well. So that is something I think all of us will need to work on, and including myself, I had to work on that as well. So there's no gap in terms of learning. There's no gap in terms of knowing the right tech. There's no gap in terms of the leadership skill. It's just like the confidence to say that this is what I can really deliver and I can do, and this is my value proposition.
So, I've been interviewing and talking to a lot of women for this series, right? And some variation of this question always comes up. And, this is one of the most common things that comes up when they're either giving advice to women or they're identifying gaps, that we're not confident and we're very self-critical. So we may be bringing the same thing as a male counterpart to the table, but we will second guess ourselves and we will be overly critical, while the male counterpart will be confident even with maybe half the skills, right? So I agree. That's something that we're all guilty of doing. Okay, so we're going to go back a little bit. Your journey started at LUMS, right? So how has that been from LUMS to these global chief investment officer roles, and how did that come about? And how has this whole experience shaped the way you lead, shaped the way you make strategic decisions today?
Um, and I think, Aleena, it's Chief Information Officer.
Oh, So let's go back quite a bit and talk about how your journey started at LUMS and then you went on to having these CIO roles at a global scale. So how has that journey been and how has that shaped the way you lead and the way you make decisions today?
So you're talking more in terms of maybe how lumps has shaped me, how that, because that's when the journey started.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit
Uh,
about that and then going from LUMS to where you are today. How has that been?
so I'll start with lumps, and then because I think that was a major chapter in my life, and um, what I really, when I really look back and see on how it all started and what has led me to achieve what I've achieved today, I can say with confidence that LUMS gave me a great foundation, but more importantly, it built the resilience in me. And to grow in your career throughout my journey, I realized resilience was the key. Lumps really instilled that resilience in terms of the how Lumps culture is. You have to be resilient. You have to survive. You have to make sure you get through your 4 years. And they really drill and grill you to make sure that you're doing the best that you can. And more importantly, I think it allowed me to be surrounded by super smart people. And I kind of used that very positively, which helped me in the future as well. That how can you surround yourself with people that you can learn from? So I think these two things really helped me throughout my career. You'll need resilience. No career is ever going to be a smooth path. You're always going to be facing obstacles. You're going to be falling down, and you just need to be like, let me keep trying, let me keep trying. And that's what happened throughout my journey, right? There were times when I had to pivot, I had to take a different role. There were times when I was not growing at all, and you just don't stop trying, you keep doing it. Um, One another thing that I really have learned throughout my journey is I realized pretty early in my career that if you want to be successful, you have to have a very open mind and you have to grow. And for you to be able to grow, you need to be open to coaching and constructive feedback. And that was definitely something that I've done and I still do. Be always open to feedback because what you may see yourself as, people in the room may see you slightly differently. They will highlight your strengths, but be very open to learn from the constructive criticism that you get so that you can work on it. If you think that you're perfect and I do the best job, you're never going to learn and become better. And leadership by itself is a journey. So getting that feedback and making yourself better, that definitely was something that I've been doing and I still do.
I think we're all guilty of that. That's like our defense mechanism where when somebody criticizes us, our reflex is to be defensive and to maybe, try to return the favor. But you're right. Sometimes that is exactly what you need to get better, and that you might take some time to absorb that criticism and then work on it. But it is always that criticism that eventually fuels you and pushes you on the right path.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. There are going to be times when. So first thing is to always seek feedback
Yeah.
actively.
Mhm.
You do not wait for people to give you feedback. You seek it actively. You seek it from people you respect. You seek it from your peers. You seek it from your teams. You don't need feedback from people who are higher up than you in the organization. It could be from anybody because you want to make sure you have um, you have point of views from different parts of the organization on how you're seen as a leader and where can you do things differently. So when you start seeking feedback in a proactive way, people become very comfortable to share with you what they truly think you do well and what they think you could do differently. Um, if I could say I seek feedback all the time, 90% or more when I've received feedback, it's been extremely valuable. It's only sometimes that, you kind of try to understand the point of view and it is not resonating with you. But majority of the time, when you ask more probing questions and try to get an example, you may have an intention of speaking in a certain way, but the other person may have perceived what you're saying very differently. And that's also a learning so that you can become better in how you are even articulating yourself.
Mm.
So, majority of the time, it is super valuable, but you kind of need to get your guards down
Yeah.
and let the feedback come in.
And that's a very interesting point that you made because most of us ask our higher ups, our managers or our manager for the feedback and not so much down the chain, right? So that's
Yes.
interesting because it's important to keep reevaluating how people see you as a leader. So that's actually a learning point for me as well. With that, I'm going to go towards closing this session. Of course, the question is going to be about AI. It's reshaping every industry and something that I mentioned earlier as well. It's kind of overwhelming, right? There's a lot of technology around us, and we're just trying to keep up. So, what skills or what approach would you advise leaders of today, technology leaders of today, in terms of adapting and staying relevant with this ever-changing and um, ever-present technology?
So I can speak to what I do myself, right? I am subscribed on LinkedIn to CIO Times, a couple of other subscriptions where I consistently get input into what is really happening in the industry. Um, Harvard Business Review is another one, but more importantly, what I really do is consistently like be open to learning. YouTube is big for me. Like there's something that I need to learn. What's the podcast around it? What are people saying about it? So at the end of the day, focus to stay relevant, you need to enjoy the learning. It shouldn't be a task for you. You need to just be open to learning and exploring. There's so much content out there. Learning these days is you can really learn a lot
Yeah.
by through LinkedIn, through other channels, but you need to enjoy that and kind of become relevant that way.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you again for your time. I had a wonderful time speaking to you. I myself learned so much. I'm sure people who will view this will also have a lot to learn from you. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.